how do you think we could find all the missing pieces here? So again, what we're looking for is, I'll call this A. So we have an angle A. We have two sides, x and z. Okay, how can we go about finding that? Henry?
So first you're going to want to solve for A.
Okay, A is the easiest piece to find, right? The missing angle here. So what is A going to equal?
90 minus 30.
So 90 minus 32 gives us 58. So we have that. All right, now, in order for us to find the other pieces, you have to set up a trig ratio that involves that piece. Okay? But you need to involve that unknown piece as the only unknown. So let's say we want to find x. Okay, so with respect to x, what trig ratio can we set up? We know both angles and one side. So if we want to set up tangent, okay, so we can say that x, as far as the tangent goes, the tangent of 32 is opposite and adjacent. So we could set up a ratio, tangent of 32 degrees is equal to opposite x over adjacent 4. And so we create this equation. This equation allows us now to solve for x by multiplying both sides by 4. And if you take the tangent, or 4 times the tangent of 32. Now notice, now it's the different command on your calculator, right? We're not doing the inverse functions. Now we're doing the second function, tan of 32. Okay, and so if we enter that, we get the value approximately 2.5 as our length. Now, did anybody get a value different, way different than that? Okay, if you got a value different than 2.5, you're in radian mode. Okay, now, starting in this chapter, the mode that your calculator's in will determine whether you're right or wrong, even if you do the calculation correctly. Okay, so make sure the next section that we're going to talk about introduces the radian mode, okay, since you guys probably have not talked about that ever. Okay, but you do need to make sure you're in the correct mode, so always check your calculator right here on the bottom of the display. Should say DEG or RAD, depending on which mode you need to be in. And for right now, for this whole section, I believe we'll stay in degree mode. So make sure it's DEG.
I just want to confirm. So when you type it in your calculator, like when it says tan 32, would you go like tan and then? I just can't see that because of glare.
Tan parentheses 32. Okay. Close the parentheses. Okay, so once we have the length x identified, what can we do to find the length z? Okay, one option is Pythagorean theorem. If you do Pythagorean theorem, make sure you use the exact value. Don't approximate. So don't just use 2.5 for x, because x is actually this whole value. So if you're going to use Pythagorean theorem, what you can do is you can select this value squared plus the other side squared, which is 4. Okay. Solve for that, and then you'd have to square root it once you take the square root of that value. So that gives you your final measure of about 4.7. And now, would this be something that you would expect? Would you expect z to be the longest side of all? Okay, now, what about angles and in this triangle? The smallest angle of a triangle is opposite the smallest side of that triangle. The largest angle of a triangle is opposite the largest side, and the middle angle is opposite the middle side. Are all those consistent with this diagram? Again, so there's no guarantee that you got it right, but it passes at least the check system for that. Okay, Grant, did you have a question? Oh. Okay. When you look at this, so you could use Pythagorean theorem, right? So what I did there is I did the 2.5 squared plus 4 squared is equal to z squared. Solve for z. Okay. The other thing that you could have done is we could have used another trig ratio to find z, right? So if we wanted to do a trig ratio instead of this, what trig ratio would relate z? Okay, so let's say we took sine. Okay, so if we use this angle of 58, we use the opposite side and the hypotenuse. That's the sine ratio, right? Opposite and hypotenuse is sine. So the sine of 58 degrees is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. And so we could solve for z here. Again, if you're entering it in your calculator, you can use the solve feature. And we can just type this in. So solve the sine of 58 is equal to 4 divided by z, solve for z, close it off. I want it in decimal form. And so I get the same thing, 4.7. It should be, if you have time to confirm it, an answer using a different method, that might be a helpful thing to do too. But you could do either of those methods, okay, to solve for your last unknown. But that's called solving for the triangle, meaning it says to find all the missing pieces, all the missing sides, all the missing angle measures.